Welcome in, everyone. Get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into a pretty dark chapter and a story you probably haven't heard before.
That's right. We're going back to 1948. Picture this. A winding mountain road in Albania.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Go on.
A truck packed with families, really packed in there, is headed to this place, Tepelina. It was one of the most, notorious labor camps in the entire country. And get this, the truck, it just overturns. A husband and wife are killed right there instantly, and their baby thrown from the wreckage. Awful.
Oh my gosh. That's just horrible.
Yeah, and this, as tragic as it was really just a glimpse into what awaited the people on their way to this camp, Tepelina.
It's hard to even imagine. So this Tepelina camp, it was part of this whole system under Albania's communist regime, right? A regime that we know was built on some pretty brutal repression, all under this, guise of creating a socialist utopia.
Exactly. And the thing is, most people don't really know the extent of what went on. So to really dig into this, we're going straight to the source, excerpts from this 2018 study about, get this, creating a museum at the former Tepelina camp.
Wow, a museum. So using this study, we're really going to try and understand the human stories, the lives impacted by this regime.
Exactly. We're going beyond the dates and the names. We're talking about real people, real suffering, and trying to grasp the reality of what they endured.
Okay, so let's back up for a second for those of us who need a little refresher. We're talking about Albania right after World War II. They finally get rid of Nazi occupation in 1944. But then things take a really dark turn, don't they?
Yeah, you could say that. Instead of, finding peace after the war, Albania ends up with the Communist Party, the very same group that led the resistance against the Nazis, grabbing power.
And they don't exactly use peaceful methods to do it.
Let's just say their tactics were brutal. The study actually quotes Mehmet Cehu, a major player in the regime. He said, and I quote, "The reaction should be eliminated. To whom to seek the weapon, either the weapon or the soul must be delivered."
Wow. He actually said that.
He did, and this was during a disarmament operation. Can you imagine?
It's chilling. So who was this Mehmet Cehu? He sounds ruthless.
He was like Enver Hoxha's right-hand man, Hoxha being the big guy, the communist leader. And that statement, during a time when they were literally ripping weapons from people's hands, talk about ruling through fear, making it clear that any opposition, real or imagined, was going to be dealt with harshly. And it didn't stop there. This study also mentions Manoush Mufti, another bigwig in the regime. Get this, he suggested that they eliminate, and I quote, all opponents from the age of 12 and above.
Wait, from 12 and above, kids? That's just unthinkable.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom, isn't it? And that's where understanding their ideology is key. These guys were hardcore Stalinists, even more extreme than what was happening in the Soviet Union at the time. Their paranoia knew no bounds. Everyone, even a 12-year-old kid, was a potential enemy.
So to justify this, how do you even begin to justify something like that?
They created these categories, right, to label anyone they saw as a threat. So you had revisionists, Trotskyites, kulaks, bourgeois, saboteurs. Anyone they wanted to target, they'd slap a label on them.
So basically, if you disagreed, even in the slightest, you were an enemy of the state, an enemy to be eliminated.
That was the message. And they were terrifyingly good at sending it. We're talking show trials, imprisonments, forced labor camps, executions, you name it, all designed to crush any form of dissent.
It's just unbelievable. The level of fear that must have permeated every aspect of life in Albania at that time, it's hard to even comprehend. It's just unimaginable to live with that constant fear, always looking over your shoulder. But how did they even go about organizing this whole system of repression? Where did these internment camps, these places like Tepelina, even come from?
So it's not like the camps, they didn't just appear overnight,
yes,
fully formed. Right after the war, things were chaotic. The regime was arresting people left and right, throwing them into any makeshift space they could find.
So not exactly the organized system of oppression we might picture?
No, not at first. It was more, haphazard. Old buildings, abandoned warehouses, anything would do. But as time went on, these places, they evolved. They went from being like temporary holding cells into something much more, calculated.
And that's where Tepelina comes in.
Exactly. Tepelina became like a central hub in this whole network of camps. But here's the thing. Just because they got more organized, that didn't mean conditions improved, not even a little bit. Life in Tepelina and the other camps like it was beyond horrific.
The study doesn't hold back. It describes Tepelina as this place of immense suffering, overcrowded barracks, constant hunger, almost no hygiene to speak of.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just limited to, those accused of political crimes.
Right. Whole families were in prison, women, children, the elderly, all thrown in together.
It's just incomprehensible. And the human toll, I mean, we're not talking about numbers here. These are real people, real lives destroyed.
And the study really drives that home. Like it
Yeah.
shares the testimony of Jiraigikala. She lost her 3-year-old daughter, Dila, in Tepelena.
Her words, they're just heartbreaking. She talks about being so desperate for food that they resorted to eating oak leaves, acorns, just trying to survive.
It's unimaginable. And then you have the account of Lech Brevici, the man who survived that horrific truck accident we talked about earlier.
Right, right.
He describes arriving at Tepelena and just seeing thousands of people crammed into these dilapidated barracks, barbed wire everywhere, armed guards. I mean, it was a nightmare.
Their everyday reality. I don't even have words.
And we can't forget the purpose of these camps. It wasn't just punishment. It was about control. Tepelena and all the others, they were designed to crush any sign of opposition. The psychological impact, that constant fear, the threat of retribution that extended far beyond the camp walls.
It's like they were trying to control not just their bodies, but their minds as well. So we're talking about a system designed not just to punish, but to completely break people, to take away any hope they had left. But Tepelena, as horrific as it was really just one piece of this much larger, much more terrifying puzzle, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's a point that just can't be overstated. These camps, they were part of this widespread system of forced labor that just permeated every corner of life in Albania under the communists. This wasn't just about prisons. This was about a system that impacted every single person, every community.
So the whole country was essentially operating under forced labor.
Pretty much, yeah. The study, it actually talks about how this forced labor, it went way beyond the camps themselves, collective farms, mines, any kind of infrastructure project. If the state needed it, there you go, forced labor. And the laborers, often political prisoners or people they just decided were, ideologically unfit, they were treated like tools. Their lives meant nothing.
It's just horrifying to think about an entire nation held hostage by this system, this complete disregard for basic human rights. And the worst part is, it didn't end quickly. I mean, the study even mentions that in the 1950s, prisoners were still only getting something like 15% of regular wages. And even then, a lot of times it was paid in goods, not even real money.
It's dehumanizing.
Yes.
That's all it was. They weren't people with families and hopes and dreams. They were just cogs in a machine.
Mm-hmm.
Their only purpose was to serve the state's economic needs, and that was it.
What about their families? The families of these prisoners. Were they spared?
You wish. The regime's reach, it went way beyond those fences. They cast a long shadow, impacted countless families, kids growing up without parents, wives without their husbands, whole generations scarred by this separation, this loss. And the fear was always there, right? That knowledge that any wrong word, any action they considered disloyal could mean sharing that same fate.
To live with that. It's hard to imagine the strength that must have taken to just get through each day.
It really makes you question, how do you even begin to repair that kind of damage? The years of fear, separation, the loss. And it makes you appreciate more than ever the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to endure even when faced with such unbelievable adversity.
Absolutely. And it begs the question, what can we learn from all of this? I mean, we're talking about Albania, but these same issues, these same struggles with political oppression, with basic human rights, they're still happening all over the world. So what can we do? What can we take away from this deep dive into Albania's past and apply to our own lives?
For me, it really highlights the importance of being aware, of being vigilant, of recognizing that the seeds of tyranny, they can take root anywhere. It can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And we can't be silent. We can't be indifferent. Those are luxuries we simply cannot afford. We have to remember these stories, the voices that were silenced, the lives that were lost. And it's not just about honoring the past, it's about fighting for a better future, a future where these kinds of atrocities are unthinkable.
It's a powerful message, and one that I think we all need to hear. Understanding history, even the darkest chapters, it can empower us to create a more just, a more compassionate world. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, we want to leave you with this. What can you do in your own life to stand up against injustice, to advocate for those whose voices are being silenced? It's a question worth thinking about, a challenge to each and every one of us to be braver, to be more compassionate, and to never, ever stay silent in the face of oppression.